Welcome to Replay Reviews, our series where we play, analyze, and offer an old-fashioned review score. If you're new to the channel, we'll quickly explain what makes our reviews different. If not, and you've been here before, go ahead and skip ahead to the next bookmark. Why the emphasis on review score? As huge Saturn fans returning to the scene a few years ago, we quickly discovered many good channels which offer a general overview of hundreds of titles, but they typically offer a perspective rather than a review itself, at least not in the hardcore sense of here's what the graphics are, the quality of the graphics are, the quality of the audio, so on and so forth. Most of us are adults with jobs, families, and responsibilities, which equates to very limited time. I think that will apply to most of you. With this in mind, we always wanted a modern source that scores games in a traditional way to help narrow the field for purchasing. We don't like relying upon 25-plus-year-old reviews, since time has a way of making games once considered bad, good, and vice versa. A good example of that would be Estall. It wasn't treated very kindly in the press, especially in Europe. It was savaged simply for being 2D at a time when 3D was all the rage, so every reviewer expected 3D. Seeing a 2D game come on the scene as a big title for the Saturn didn't do it any favors, and it was not scored based on its own merit, but it was scored as if it should have been a 3D game. So that's what I mean, where we can't count on that kind of scoring to guide our decisions today. And that's why we created this channel. So the Replay Review series will help out our fellow retro gamers while giving us an excuse to play even more Saturn games. Today we're looking at a legendary and previously inaccessible JRPG, Lunar, the Silver Star. You may also see it or hear it called Lunar, the Silver Star Story Complete. It's the same game. There's a slight difference in the complete version requires a Saturn's MPEG card, but we're not going to really get into that today because it's too trivial to make a difference. While fans of the series are familiar with the Sega CD and PlayStation versions localized by working designs, the Saturn incarnation remained untranslated for decades. That is until the modern and excellent work of an amazing fan translation team finally made it available for us English speakers. We'll begin with a quick overview of the differences between the Sega CD original and the Saturn remake, then offer a quick grade of the fan translation itself before moving into the proper review and the scoring. So is this fan translation worth the hype, or are you better off sticking with the Sega CD original? Let's dive in. First, a quick overview on what makes the Saturn version different from the Sega CD original. Story-wise, Lunar Silver Star story follows the general trajectory and journey of the original, though there are some expanded story arcs, subplots, and even one notable change. Until I go back and replay the original, which I haven't since the 90s, I can't make a good assessment on most of these changes, just what I can remember or what I've heard. I will say that at least one change I felt made little sense and tended to harm the story more than help, at least one I could notice. Though some of the new diversions were very welcome, basically under the premise of, more of a good game is a good thing. Unlike some conversions from one console to the other, Lunar is visually quite different from its Sega CD incarnation. One such improvement is in the cutscenes, whereas the Sega CD original used a mix of animated stills and limited grainy cutscenes that you'd expect from that era. The Saturn port, which features full-motion hand-drawn cutscenes that are absolutely gorgeous, it's a pretty stark contrast in that respect. Given the drastically superior video playback quality of the Saturn, this almost goes without saying. But the team at Game Arts and Studio Alex spent the time and money to create truly anime quality productions, which shows in the final product. Graphically, the Saturn version boasts beautifully rendered, high-resolution sprites and detailed environments that surpass the Sega CD in every way. Compared to other 2D JRPGs of the 32-bit era, Lunar: The Silver Star story definitely sits comfortably toward the top of the heap. Complementing the fantastic graphics, the Red Book audio soundtrack is excellent and of the quality you'd expect from the Lunar series. Picking up and playing this for the first time last year, when the last time I had touched Lunar was on the Sega CD in the 90s, the OST was what I expect for the series. That said, it didn't match my memories from my childhood. In fact, I broke out my Sega CD copy, which I still have, to see if my memory was skewed by nostalgia. But in my opinion, not only is the music different, but the original is better. For the most part, the Saturn soundtrack is its own original thing, with a few exceptions where clear inspiration is present, i.e. it sounds like a remix of sorts. Like I said, it sounds like Lunar music, but it's as if these were the tracks cut from the original, like the second tier tracks that didn't make it. Again, it's not bad JRPG tunes, just not as good as the original. One last thought is the combat system. Lunar: Silver Star story adopts the improved combat system of the sequel Lunar Eternal Blue. Additionally, the battles are no longer randomized, and you can see the enemies on the map with the potential to avoid some. Sometimes you can't, it's just impossible. Should you want to keep a move on, it's possible. Like I said, sometimes you can't avoid them, but you can. If you're strategic, you can avoid quite a few if you're really just trying to get from point A to point B. I found this to be an overall improvement, though it was bogged down somewhat by the battle load times. They aren't bad, and again, on their own would be perfectly average, just like the music. But compared to the Sega CD, which had very snappy battle load times, it is noticeable, but it's only going to be noticeable if you play one after the other. It's not something that really on its own was something that stood out to me. At the end of the day, these differences only matter to the fans of the original. So if you've played the Sega CD, it'll matter, and how much it matters will depend from person to person. Basically, you can set aside this entire portion of the view if you've never played the Sega CD version, or it's been so long that you don't think you remember it at all. So if you're coming into this fresh and it's your first time and you've never touched Lunar, none of this matters. I wouldn't be complaining any of these aspects, if it weren't for the fact that I was a Lunar Sega CD early adopter. So yeah, take all that with a grain of salt. Let's talk about the fan translation. The whole reason we can even play this game is this English translation. First and foremost, the most critical point, it works. The game is fully playable from start to finish in English. This is a monumental achievement all in and of itself, and I can't say anything bad about it. All dialogue, menu, item descriptions, character names, and spell names, everything I personally encountered after a full playthrough were translated. I didn't come across anything that wasn't. And if there was any bad translation done, it didn't stand out enough that I remember it now. So take that with a mild grain of salt. I think if there was anything notable, I would have remembered it. I'm sure over the course of a lengthy game, there might have been a few things here and there that I just don't remember, but not anything that stands out. I could say that the translation is as good as any translation you would have seen at the time. Maybe today with bigger budgets and more people, there might be a little bit better or more accurate or something along those lines, but it's nothing that I noticed in the game. I think the translation was excellent. I think they caught the meaning of what was intended. I didn't see any major grammatical errors or any that I remember. It's excellent, very well done. The quality for the bulk of the script is surprisingly good in terms of the actual text, what people are saying to each other. The majority is pretty good. It's got that Working Designs humor, love it or hate it. I think for me it's nostalgic because I grew up where I didn't have a choice other than to accept the fact that there was this one company, Working Designs, and outside of Sega, it was pretty much Working Designs bringing us these games. So it's nostalgic for me in a good way. I know a lot of people have hate for it. I'm not one of those. There are points in some of the Working Designs editions that become a little obnoxious in certain games. And certainly that's the case with Lunar. Some of the actual translations done by editions, I guess we'll say, by Working Designs. There were some points where it's like, okay, this is a little freshman. You've done this joke a little bit too long. Let's move on. I would say that's the worst part of the translation, but that's not the fan translation part. It's not their fault. They just took the Working Designs translation and made it happen. So there's some points in there where the humor is a little sophomoric, but it's very trivial in the grand scheme of the narrative. Most of the narrative, it's mostly lighthearted. There's some that's not, but I mean, overall, the narrative is good. I can't say the little parts by Working Designs hurt it in any major way. It's like I said, there was a couple spots where I thought, okay, let's move it on, guys. Went a little too far, not in a way that's going to get you kicked off social media kind of way. But it sometimes it was just obnoxious, but not that bad. For the most part, it reads naturally, avoiding common pitfalls of literal translations that can sound stiff and awkward. Like when there's something translated strictly by AI with no human intervention, how it just has that uncanny sound to it. It doesn't sound like the way somebody would talk. I didn't notice any of that. The team clearly put a massive amount of effort into not just translating the words, but the meaning. Again, my understanding is it was more them taking Working Designs translation and putting it in. But I seem to recall that some of this was their own work. I could be wrong on one of those. I'm not exactly sure where this current rendition of the translation, I think we're at 1.51. But my understanding is that there's a little bit of both in there, of the people who translated it translating it themselves and then borrowing Working Designs text for the PS1 version. Furthermore, the team has continued supporting the project, creating bug fixes and providing further enhancements, such as a version which supports the Saturn's optional MPEG video card, which I mentioned earlier. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. There's very few games that support it. It's $100. It's not worth the price, in my opinion, to get it unless you're just super diehard and want to have those handful of games that can use it, and you have to have it, and you've got $100 burning in your pocket. Go ahead and get it. But otherwise, I'm glad they did it. It shows a great deal of dedication by the team. I'm glad they did it. It opens that door. So that option is there should you want to use it. And the MPEG card, if you don't know, it provides a higher quality of video playback for the Saturn than it can do on its own. That's it. Accessibility, fans have made this title fully accessible. The patched ROM is readily accessible online from many sources. As well as several reputable sellers offering full reproduction options. For those without the expertise, equipment, or time to make it yourself, wink, wink, check out our links in the description. For fans who love the Saturn hardware and want to experience Lunar in all its 2D glory with a language barrier, this translation is an absolute godsend. All right, so now we're on to the review. For this review series, all grades are given based upon hardware limitations of the day and game standards of the day. Not journalist opinions, but the standards that were applied in game development at the time. We do our best to ignore modern remakes, modern game expectations, etc. So if there's a game that's been remade for the Switch, like there's been a bunch of those, I'm not going to compare something on the Saturn to something on the Switch or the PC or anything like that. It's purely based upon what was available on the Saturn versus competitors. So the PlayStation, the 3DO, that's what we're comparing it to. Remember, just like reviews though back in the day, our analysis may vary from your own. I can guarantee that there's going to be things that we say that you don't fully agree with. It's very unlikely that what we're scoring it in every different, because there's a lot of categories that we're scoring it in. It's very unlikely you're going to agree with all of our scores. Hopefully you'll agree with our general score. And I believe that the majority of retro gamers would generally accept our score as close to what they would do after they played the game. I feel pretty comfortable saying that. If there's ever a point where I feel like I'm making some kind of radical divergence from what the normal gamer is going to think about something, I'll be sure to bring that up and make a point to mention that. But it's certainly not the case today. But I do encourage everyone to use our score system, because you're going to see our scorecards after each grade. I do encourage everyone to, using our scoring system, make your own analysis and scores in the comments. I think that would be very interesting to see everybody using the same scoring system and what grade they come up with compared to ours. So I definitely encourage that. All right, the first category, the graphics. In line with its reputation, the Saturn delivers top-tier 2D graphics, rivaling the best in the genre for the era. They very much have the flair of the Lunar series and the quality I expected from game arts of the day. I was never blown away, but did have some memorable moments where I was impressed. High quality and memorable, but nothing earth-shattering. So, JRPG, Saturn 2D sprites, it's what I expect from it. Nothing, thinking back now, just absolutely wows me, but it was all very good. So for the graphics grade, we've got everything broken down for each category into subcategories. For graphics, we have quality, diversity, backgrounds, characters, and memorability. So how memorable is this to me? For quality, I've got it at 2, diversity at 1, backgrounds 1, characters 2, memorability 2, for an overall score of 8 out of 10 for the graphics. Mechanics. The accessibility and intuitiveness of the controls were a bright spot on the Sega CD and held true with the Saturn. Things were improving on the whole for JRPGs in the 32-bit era, and tweaks were made by the developers to keep pace with the other above-average titles of the day. Still, Lunar remains, in my opinion, above average of all the other 32-bit JRPGs. It wasn't the best, but it's certainly above average. Combined with standout combat system for the time, make it easy for beginners to pick up and play. I think that's a really important thing to say about the Lunar series as a whole. It was an accessible RPG, and I've heard lots of people mention that they never really liked JRPGs, but Lunar hooked them. If not making them into RPG fans, it was an RPG they could play. It was something that grabbed them, and that's a testament to the design of this game and its mechanics. Another bright spot for the time was the characters and the story. It was, made it more accessible, but we'll get more into that. Fundamentally, Game Arts nailed the mechanics, which were a selling point at the time of its release and remain true today. Mechanics, we got control 2, intuition 2, accessibility 2, options 2, respect 2. We get 10 out of 10 on the mechanics. For audio, the effects are quality and have the memorability of the series. They have that Lunar sound to them. Nothing to blow your socks off, but fitting with the JRPGs of the day. And again, it's what I expected from Game Arts. It has their kind of unique sound to it. It's got that flair. Of important note here would be the voice quality and acting. While short of today's standards, the voice quality is excellent and the acting well above average for the day. And if you're not familiar with what voice acting was like in the 90s, plenty of videos you can watch about that, or you just play enough games from the 90s and you'll know what I'm talking about. Most of it was funny bad or sometimes just bad, but Lunar was very good for the day. It probably wouldn't be as good today, but for the day it was good. So in playing back, just this year, I thought it was fine. I didn't have any issues with it. There was a few points that were mildly funny, but for the most part, it was very competent voice acting. So for our audio grade, for overall quality, we've got 2, voice, we've got 2, atmosphere 2, diversity 1, and memorability 2. So overall score, 9 out of 10. Now the music. Again, this title is being rated as a standalone title, so I will not deduct points comparing it to the Sega CD soundtrack. As previously mentioned, the soundtrack fits well within the Lunar series and is high quality. That said, when thinking about the OST as I type the script, I can clearly remember several tracks of the Sega CD game that I haven't played since the early 90s, whereas I can't specifically remember any of the music from this newer version, the remake. Only that it was good. I only mention this to emphasize the difference between a good OST and a great one. A great soundtrack stays with you, and you can distinctly remember songs from a great soundtrack. A good one is almost unremarkable. It's just what you expect. So you don't really remember anything from it. That's ironic because a bad soundtrack you will remember, and you might even remember distinctive songs from a bad soundtrack. It's just, I think, how the human brain works. You remember remarkable things, good or bad. And when something is perfectly normal, perfectly average, you don't really think much about it. And I think that's how I can summarize the music. It fits with Lunar. It sounds like Lunar, but it's B tier. Nothing memorable, nothing bad. Quality, 1. Replayability, 1. Atmosphere, 1. Diversity, 1. And the memorability, 1. So this is going to be our lowest score for this review, 5 out of 10 on the music. All right, here we are. This is the summary of the review and our final score, our overall enjoyment of the game. When it comes to RPGs, story is king, mechanics are the queen, and the soundtrack is the princess. We've discussed the mechanics and the soundtrack, and as a storyline only matters for certain types of games, we will include that here. Lunar Silver Star story has a rather standard JRPG storyline of love, strife, saving the world, the typical things. It could have used a bit more depth, originality, and a few of the story arcs / characters feel underdeveloped. That all said, the characters are very memorable and the story very well written. I believe the characters are what really make Lunar so well remembered by us fans. And it really makes the narration work, even though it's pretty standard otherwise. And I think sometimes well-written characters really can be that big of a difference, and I think that's the case here. This is an excellent title that every RPG lover must play, and everyone else should give a chance due to the accessibility of the game and the likability of the cast. Highly recommended. So our final score analysis. In graphics, we had 8. Mechanics, we had 10. Audio, we had 9. Soundtrack, 5. And our fun factor score is going to be 9. Our overall score for Lunar Silver Star Story, 8.2. So is the Sega Saturn English translation of Lunar Silver Star Story worth your time? Absolutely. This fan project breathes new life into a truly beautiful and important version of a beloved JRPG. We recommend every Saturn owner have this in their collection. Have you already played this gem? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And most importantly, if you'd like to share your score based on our grading system, please do. I think that will be very interesting. Guys, remember, please like, subscribe, share the channel, all that jazz. It really, really helps. Our current goal is to try to get to 3,000 subscribers. Please help us get there. Thanks for your time. We'll see you next time.